if your character is one that stands out, if your mental skill set is one that stands out, those are all separators that can help make the difference between do you get drafted or do you not, or do you get drafted, like 10th versus like 15th or 15th versus 20th.
Welcome to the Elev8 podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. If you are a return listener, I'd be grateful for your rating or review. And if you dig this episode, give us a like or share. And now, whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode founded Courtex Performance in 2013, where he is the lead mental performance coach for their NBA and FIBA clients. As a former college player, skills trainer, and youth coach, he's worked closely with numerous high-level pros and prospects, as well as some of the top coaches and executives in the game. Additionally, he has provided NBA pre-draft consulting services to multiple organizations, including the Miami Heat, Utah Jazz, and Milwaukee Bucks. Outside of basketball, he has consulted with clients in numerous other sports up to the Olympic level. A native of Germany, he is fluent in both English and German. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, Rainer Meisterjahn.
Appreciate it, my guy.
Great to have you on. You are a mental skills performance coach, played basketball, speak multiple languages. Before we kind of get into Courtex Performance, I want to hear a little bit about your athletic career. I know you were an athlete growing up, played different sports. What was it like for you growing up as an athlete?
Interesting, different from most. So I grew up in Germany. Started in equestrian sports, actually. That's something that my dad was really into. So I used to jump horses competitively at a very young age. I mean, I was, competing against adults when I was like, 11, 12, 13 years old. And then eventually decided to quit, which I think my dad is still a little bit upset about it. But, then fell in love with basketball when I was about 13, 14 years old, and really got into it. Started playing locally a little bit back home. Eventually came over to the States, played in high school, and then was able to come back and play in college for a small school up in Maine. I was also a runner. I ran cross country. And then eventually, once I finished my bachelor's degree, I went back to Germany and played semi-pro for a year, did some youth coaching, and eventually then decided to start my career in sports psychology, go to graduate school, and I guess the rest is history. I never quite made it to the NBA like I had planned to, but I gave it a good try, I guess.
Yeah. One quick question on the equestrian follow-up.
Uh-huh.
I had a coworker's friend, daughter who did it. And how old were you when you got on the horses to jump these horses?
Man, I must have been super young. I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old. I mean, I started young, maybe younger than that.
I just admire the courage it takes for a little kid that young to get on an animal and to jump it and to teach it skills. I don't think it gets respect sometimes.
Right. I feel like you're probably more courageous when you first start, right? And then the fear starts kicking in as you get older.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I could relate it maybe to skiing out here.
Yeah.
a little bit. So tell us a little bit about Courtex Performance.
Right. So we started the company in 2013. So, we've been around for a few years now. And our focus is primarily in terms of sports is on basketball. 90% of what we do is basketball, even though we started getting into some other sports organically. But for us, it's really all about proactive mental skills training. And our focus primarily has been on individual basketball players at different levels, starting at sometimes the middle school level, but typically high school level, college, pro. Right, so overseas pros, NBA pros, it's a combination of all of those. And we also do team consulting on occasions. We have team contracts with some colleges. We have a team contract overseas. We are getting more and more into the coaching education space as well. And then we do NBA pre-draft consulting. So we've ran interviews and done personality assessments and things of that nature for NBA organizations as well.
I always find that fascinating. Can you, not talking about players and people and organizations, but can you talk about the important role that just the off the court, the mindset, character, the person has to do, when it comes to being successful at that level or even getting a chance?
I mean, it's huge, obviously. I would say when you look at the NBA draft, obviously most players will get drafted based on talent and ability. But, if your character is one that stands out, if your mental skill set is one that stands out, those are all separators that can, help make the difference between do you get drafted or do you not, or do you get drafted, like 10th versus like 15th or 15th versus 20th, right? So it's really all about maximizing those little separators, and certainly once you make to that level, if you do, having stability in your day-to-day management and your overall, life skills, if you will, is just so vital. We see it more and more during COVID right now, like how much, like all of us struggle in different ways, but certainly these high-performing athletes and the ones that don't have a fundamental set of life skills and mental skills. I mean, it's just I don't want to say lost cause, but it's an uphill battle. It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, the pandemic is definitely a routine disruptor. It seems like. And I've heard you talk on other podcasts about this. Can you talk just about the importance of having that daily process, daily routine? Maybe as an athlete or just as people that want to have more success.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we look at when we do personality assessments with our clients is to what degree does the individual actually value structure and find motivation in structure and in routine. So
cool.
We're not all wired in the same way, but even if you're somebody that likes to say more like be more creative or like go with the flow, be more spontaneous, a certain amount of structure in your day-to-day life is certainly beneficial when you're competing at a certain level, just because it does help you stay more on balance. So whether it's, getting in a 10-minute morning meditation, having a sleep routine in the evening, like those types of things, I mean, they add up over time, right? And you need to have some sense of stability through your routines to be able to bring it on the court night in and night out, because it's just an extremely stressful lifestyle.
Yeah, the games come fast at that level, at the high level.
Yeah, it's crazy, and the travel. I mean, the travel is what makes it so incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Like traveling between different time zones. Getting to the hotel at like 4 a.m. and then you got to play the next day. I mean, I traveled with a NBA team a couple of years ago. I just went on the road with them for like a week, and I was like, man, like this is exhausting.
Yeah. And were you weren't playing like 38 minutes a game?
Exactly. Yeah.
At that time. You mentioned meditation. Can you talk a little bit about, is that something you guys encourage athletes to do? Something I'm a huge fan of. I've been a meditator for about 5 years and found a lot of good things from it. Can you speak about, how you guys might coach that or how you integrate that?
Yeah, certainly we recommend it to pretty much all of our athletes. It doesn't resonate with everybody, but it's a skill that I think if you open yourself up to it, it's going to benefit you. Yeah. Right. And to me, like oftentimes you'll hear athletes say, well, I tried it out and I just wasn't good at it. Right. So I didn't stick with it. But it's really not about are you good at it or not. It's about you do it or not. And it's about when we talk about this idea of neuroplasticity, reshaping your neural connections so you can, learn to be more focused, so you can potentially like gain confidence, right? Like those different types of things. It really comes down to the refocusing in meditation. So, you take a couple of breaths, your focus drifts like mine does all the time, right?
Yeah.
then you catch it, like you catch onto it, you bring it back, right? And then same thing again and again and again, to where in a 10-minute meditation, you might have to refocus dozens of times, but that's where the magic really happens. Even though you might not walk out of that meditation feeling incredible necessarily, like there are long-term benefits to it.
Yeah, I've heard it, sometimes when you get those reps in the gym, you walk out feeling the burn, and sometimes the burns may not feel it, but you still got the work in.
Yeah.
You got the reps in. I jumped right into meditation, but can you talk a little bit also about your philosophy at Courtex, and just kind of your approach, or if you have a new athlete, how do you first kind of guide where you need to kind of close gaps?
Yeah, so generally speaking, as far as our philosophy is concerned, we look at mental training as being something that should be done proactively. It should be personalized to the needs of the individual athlete, and it should be systematic to a degree, right? To where you almost come at it as if it's strength conditioning for the mind, if you will. And maybe you've heard that term before. It's nothing new, but that's really how it should be done. Typically, we still find that a lot of athletes kind of start in a reactive place when they first seek out someone like us. But then we try to move them to that kind of proactive space and make sure that they stick with mental training for the long term. So it's a lot about fine tuning and making adjustments and just being aware of things like, how well did I execute my core values in today's game? What were some instances where my focus shifted in the wrong direction? What did I do to get it back? What did I look like behaviorally out there? Would it benefit me going into next game to clap more, to max out my next play speed a little bit more if I had a tendency to like hold on to a turnover or a bad call by the ref or something like that.
What the clap more? Talk about how maybe clapping more can maybe make a difference.
Well, so what we found is that a lot of athletes already do it organically, in that they clap one time to refocus. So I always feel like when you have athletes that when they get frustrated by like a bad call or something like that, they tend to show, so like the ones that have it figured out, they go to that one clap, and it's just a quick signal to the brain to like refocus and move on. Other athletes, you have to teach them those type of like micro skills, if you will, right? Because they get caught up in bad body language, complaining, whatever, and then 5 seconds pass and the other team has already scored a bucket, right? And you're still preoccupied with what happened earlier. Aside from that, aside from the one clap, obviously like clapping can be something that can induce energy into a team or give the individual athlete energy. Right. And then you look at those type of behaviors in combination with like positive touches and like initiating huddles, various tangible things that you can do to actually bring a sense of leadership and connection to a group.
I think there's like back in about a decade, doctor was it Cal Berkeley did the study with the NBA and the physical touching.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it was always fascinating, that the teams that are more successful just did a lot more of the things that you just described on the court.
Exactly. And there's a pretty cool video actually on Steve Nash on YouTube as well that talked about how frequently he engaged in positive touches per game. So they literally like tracked him for an entire season. This was when he was in his MVP years.
Okay.
And so one thing that we sometimes do with our clients is when it comes to the mental game, when it comes to body language and behavior and things like that, like we don't have set standards to aspire to, right? So we'll ask him like, how many times per game do you think you give positive touches, right? And do you feel like you're good at it, right? And they might be like, well, I think I'm really good at it. I do it at least 25 times per game, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm like, all right, well, guess how many times Steve Nash used to do it. And like his number was, the exact one was like 239 times per game, if I remember correctly.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's really interesting, right? Because a lot of the mental stuff and the leadership stuff oftentimes isn't as tangible as like aspiring to like score 15 points in the game or grab 8 rebounds.
Right.
So the more tangible we can make it, the easier it is for athletes to proactively strive towards that.
What are maybe some other, simple techniques athletes or coaches that might be listening that to try to make some of these mental skills a little bit more tangible in their practice or their daily routine?
So one fundamental one that we use with our athletes at the beginning of our process is developing out your core values, right? And we make it specific to on-court performance. So we want to know, hey, like, what are the things that you want to be known for, and what are the things that you identify with, right? And what do those look like in action? So if you say, man, like, I really value competitiveness, well, what does that look like for you? Does it mean diving on the floor? Does it mean, boxing out aggressively on the glass? Does it mean attacking the paint on the offensive end, right? So then we incorporate those core values into the athletes' pregame check-in. So we build out custom forms for our athletes to where pregame they can go in, they can be like, okay, like here are my core values to kind of visualize in terms of how I want to focus on those today. Here are some specific focus cues to add on top of that, right? And then post game coming back and being like, okay, like my competitiveness, I feel like was a 4 out of 5. So next game I need to do X, Y, and Z to get to a 5 out of 5. So just an example that something that's very fundamental to our process.
Yeah, I love that the military is really good at the back brief, end of mission debrief, whatever, different. I know they call it different things, but can you talk about how important that is to, not just going in the game to get your headspace right, but also that post-game reflection and evaluation?
For us, it's huge. Not enough athletes do it, because I think the reality of it is most athletes come out of a game, they're like, shit, like I played terrible and I'm going to feel terrible about it for the rest of the night. Or, maybe you played really well and now you get caught up in the excitement and then texting with a million people and spending, 3 hours on like Twitter to see, all the nice things people are saying about you.
Right.
But if you can have that post game debrief, like you said, it really helps you stay in tune with who you are and who you want to be out there. And it also helps you, even after a great performance, identify things that will kind of go into continuous growth, right? And it kind of closes the loop and helps you build continuity towards the next game in just a more proactive kind of way.
Do you advise or utilize athletes to make use of any type of cooling off period in between, or how close following a game or a match or anything like that? Do you advise them to kind of do those post game evals? Is it right away?
We give athletes flexibility. Typically, I'll tell them, look, do it in the next 24 hours. Some knock it out right away. Some do it the next day. I think it depends on the individual athlete and what's comfortable. But to your point, obviously, sometimes coming out of a game, you might be like kind of hot, right? Like because you're pissed because things didn't go your way, right? And it could really take some of the objectivity out of a self-evaluation.
Yeah, I'm a big journaler. I think sometimes maybe when when we have bad games or bad moments, sometimes journaling is a good thing. Do you find, is that something you guys ever talk about with guys, or maybe in that post game evaluation when there is a flood of emotion that isn't great, use that as a tool?
We do selectively. Some athletes, it really resonates with them. Part of our post game evaluation is also we call it an S3 analysis, if you will. So strength, struggle, strategy. So we have them jot down their thoughts on what did I do well, what did I struggle with, and then what are the specific strategies to carry over my positives and address my struggles going into the next game. But, sometimes we also have athletes that like more of the kind of free flowing type of journaling. And that's something we definitely recommend if it resonates. I like speed journaling. I haven't done it in a while, but I used to, when I was going through just life stuff. And, it was great just being like, hey, let me just set my alarm for like 10 minutes and just write without putting my pen down and just see how I feel after. And it was like super therapeutic, to be honest.
Yeah, so I think sometimes just a mind dump,
Yeah.
it just empties some things out, right? You can meditate to get to empty space. Sometimes you got to write it out. I don't know.
Right.
Um, uh, if you could get into a time machine, go back and see 16-year-old you, what's
Uh-huh.
one piece of advice that you've learned along your journey that you would share with yourself?
Man, that's such a great question. I think one thing that I've really learned and am still learning is, this idea of how can you really strive for something without clinging to the outcome, and it kind of goes into mindfulness and Buddhist study a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we all tend to just like grasp, like when, sometimes it's hard for us to set a goal and not be completely attached to and identified with the outcome, and I think when you are too overly identified with it, and say an opportunity like doesn't come through for you, it really puts you in a bad spot, especially if you're already prone to like beating yourself up and like being hard on yourself and stuff like that. And that was definitely something that back then, more so than now, like I really struggled with. Like I was always like really good at like striving and like going harder than everybody else, like whether it be as an athlete, like getting into like business and stuff. But I wasn't good at sometimes just taking a breath and just like letting things go.
Yeah. Yeah. Along your journey, or maybe even now, are there people that you find fascinating that you like to learn from in the mental space, sports psychology, that other listeners maybe could find a book or podcast on those people? Are there people that you find fascinating to learn from?
There are a lot of people that I find fascinating to learn from. They're not always necessarily in my space, but
Yeah.
certainly, like Ken Reviza was somebody that I really, admired, and have read his books and taken some good stuff from him. Used to talk to Keith Henshin, who also passed away not too long ago. Used to speak with him, quite a bit, because he had that NBA background, and also a lot of wisdom,
Yeah.
from his long career in the field. So there are some of those types of folks. Generally speaking, I would say I listen to a ton of podcasts, like on lifestyle, on mental skills, on coaching. Like I really like learning from people that are kind of in related spaces that connect back to the mental space, whether it be sleep specialists, nutritionists, player development people, just to name a few.
Excellent. So one thing I think on leadership and learning, you always be learning, right?
Uh-huh.
I think. Well, thank you for sharing some of those names. I know the first two you shared, for those listeners that aren't familiar with them, those are some of like the original OG sports psychologists in sports, those guys for sure. So you talked about listening to podcasts. I want to thank you so much for being on this podcast and coming on to share some time. Last question we like to ask our guests is, how do you define success?
Huh. Wow, that's man, how do I define success? I just feel like it looks so different for different people. I think success ultimately is about that feeling of fulfillment, right? Achieving some sense of fulfillment and connection with your mission, if you will. So when you look at it in the professional space, is it like, to me, it's not about getting to X amount in revenue or X amount of clients, but it's really more so about how connected do I feel to my mission in terms of empowering athletes to maximize their performance, if you will.
Thank you for tuning in and all the way to the end. Appreciate that. If something this episode caught your ear, is useful or unique, I would love if you would share it, or, a thumbs up's always encouraging as well. If you want to come back and check out more videos, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications, and we'd love to have you back. Have a great day, and go elevate up. Listen up, 'cause I'll only say it once. I'm gonna show you all the